The harsh fluorescent lights of Terminal 4 at JFK cast long, unforgiving shadows that day. Shadows that seemed to cling to 17-year-old Jalen Reynolds as he navigated the bustling space. He wasn't trying to attract attention, wasn't trying to fade into the background either. Jalen simply moved with a quiet confidence, his duffel bag rolling smoothly behind him, the bass of his hip-hop playlist thrumming softly through his noise-canceling headphones. He liked to observe, to soak in the atmosphere of a place, the subtle shifts in energy that told a story without words. Today, the story felt different. He was heading to Los Angeles, a city of dreams and disappointments, a place where fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. Jalen wasn't chasing dreams, not in the traditional sense. He was going to handle business, a responsibility far beyond his years, a weight he carried with a maturity that belied his age. As he approached the priority boarding lane for American Majesty Airlines, the air seemed to thicken, the invisible current of the terminal shifting ever so slightly. It wasn't a dramatic change, no sudden screech of brakes or blaring alarm, but it was there. The smiles of the gate agents seemed to stretch a little too thin, their eyes lingering on him a fraction longer than necessary. A subtle coolness permeated the air, a drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the terminal's climate control. Jalen felt it all. He'd grown accustomed to these microaggressions, these silent judgments that whispered louder than any shouted insult. It was a language he'd learned to speak fluently growing up Black in America, a language of sideways glances and unspoken assumptions. He reached the gate, his boarding pass ready on his phone. The gate agent, a man in his late 20s with a meticulously groomed beard and a crisp uniform that looked like it had been ironed 5 minutes ago, stepped in front of him, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hold up, kid," he said, his voice carrying just enough for the passengers nearby to hear. "We've seen your type before. Trying to sneak your way into first class, huh?" Jalen blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Excuse me?" The gate agent crossed his arms, adopting a patronizing tone. "You're not the first to try it. This area is for actual ticket holders." A few passengers in the waiting area chuckled, a low, rumbling sound of complicity. A woman with designer luggage muttered, "Unbelievable," loud enough for Jalen to hear. Jalen kept his voice level, his tone even. "I have a ticket." The gate agent's eyes narrowed, but he didn't ask to see it. Not yet. "Oh, really? Let's see it then." Jalen unlocked his phone and pulled up the digital boarding pass, a clean, scannable code from the airline's own app. The gate agent glanced at it, then scoffed. "Please. Fake screenshot. That app layout is ancient." "It's not fake," Jalen replied, his patience beginning to fray. "Check your system." The man sighed dramatically, as if dealing with Jalen was the greatest inconvenience of his day. He sauntered over to the podium and scanned the code. A loud beep, a flash of red, error. He turned back to Jalen, a theatrical shrug in his posture. "See? Not valid." Jalen felt a surge of panic, quickly tamped down. "Try again." Another scan, another red flash. This time, the gate agent leaned over to his colleague, a younger woman with short blonde hair and a hesitant expression. He whispered something and she began typing manually into the system, her brow furrowed. I think the name's in here," she said, her voice uncertain. But the male gate agent seized on her hesitation. "Of course not. This is what I'm talking about. These scams are getting bolder." He turned to Jalen, his voice sharp. "Listen, I don't know how you got that QR code, but this isn't your seat. Go sit over there while we sort it out." He gestured towards a row of metal chairs against the wall. Jalen didn't move. "The name is Jalen Reynolds. Check the confirmation email. I booked this a week ago through Black Card Concierge." That made the woman glance at him again, her eyes widening slightly. But the man just rolled his eyes. "Black Card, right. And I'm Beyoncé's backup dancer. Look, you can keep acting, or you can sit down while we call this in." Jalen's jaw tightened. More passengers were watching now. Most said nothing, but their eyes were full of judgment. One man smirked as he walked past. A teenage girl took out her phone, pretending to text, but Jalen could see the recording light was on. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Jalen said, his voice low and dangerous. The gate agent raised an eyebrow. "You're not in a position to request anything, buddy." The woman beside him winced. "Connor, maybe we should just—" "No, we follow protocol. Sit down and wait for verification," Connor snapped. Jalen didn't argue. He simply walked over to the seats, his movements calm, but his anger simmering beneath the surface. He pulled out his phone and began typing, starting a file to record everything. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned on the voice memo. This wasn't just a delay. This was the first move in a game he was determined to win. He was going to remember every single second of it. As Jalen sat on the cold metal chair outside the boarding gate, the low hum of voices and the quiet pings of boarding announcements filled the space, creating a false sense of normalcy, as if nothing unjust had just occurred. But he knew better. He could feel the weight of their prejudice, their assumptions, still clinging to him like a shadow, invisible but undeniable. His phone vibrated in his hand, a text from someone on the ground team he'd quietly alerted through the Black Card hotline. Looking into the manifest, "Hold tight, don't escalate, don't escalate," was getting harder with every passing minute. Just then, a new figure approached from the side. She moved with sharp, mechanical precision, her navy blazer pressed to perfection, her gold-plated name tag catching the light. "Supervisor Jenkins," it read. She stopped in front of Jalen and looked down, not at his face, but at his shoes. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her voice smooth but devoid of warmth. "We'll be allowing you to board shortly, but before that, TSA has requested a routine spot check of your belongings." Jalen narrowed his eyes. "Just me?" Supervisor Jenkins offered a tight smile, devoid of genuine warmth. "Random selection." Behind her, not a single other passenger had been pulled aside. Not the man with the bulging coat pocket, not the woman juggling two oversized carry-ons. Just him. "You can follow me," she said, gesturing toward a smaller inspection area just beyond the gate. Heads were turning now, curious glances from luxury-suited men and diamond-clad women flicking toward him, some with amusement, others with discomfort, most pretending not to notice. Jalen stood, rolled his bag silently, and followed Supervisor Jenkins through a frosted glass partition where a second gate agent waited, gloves on, expression unreadable. "Pop it open," the man said. Jalen unzipped his carry-on, exposing neatly packed essentials: tablet, chargers, 2 hardcover books, a leather-bound planner, and a box of cufflinks wrapped in a silk pouch. The man poked around, then opened a smaller zipper and found nothing but a folded blazer. "All clear," he said. Supervisor Jenkins didn't budge, her eyes swept from the bag to Jalen's hoodie. "Where's the rest of your attire?" Jalen blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your dress code. You're in first class. Our premium section requires appropriate business or upscale casual wear. Your sweatshirt doesn't quite meet that expectation." Her tone was clinical, as if reading policy from a manual. "There's no dress code posted," Jalen replied. "I've flown with this exact airline, exact hoodie." No one said a word. Supervisor Jenkins clasped her hands in front of her. "Perhaps not, but today's clientele is of a certain caliber. We've received feedback in the past about appearances. The front cabin is part of the brand experience." Jalen's jaw clenched. "And what exactly do I look like? A threat to your brand?" Supervisor Jenkins didn't answer. "You're welcome to change," she offered, "or we can reassign your seat to the main cabin, just to avoid further discomfort." "Discomfort for who?" Jalen asked, his voice now laced with a fire beneath the calm. Supervisor Jenkins's smile twitched. "Let's not make this difficult." The second gate agent said nothing, just stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the scene. Jalen pulled out his tablet, tapped twice, and held it up. On screen was a live chat window with American Majesty Executive Concierge. His latest message, cabin supervisor requesting seat downgrade due to appearance. "Record this." He tapped send and looked Supervisor Jenkins dead in the eyes. "Continue." Supervisor Jenkins blinked once. "Your belongings are clear," she said stiffly. "You may proceed to board." Jalen zipped his bag slowly, deliberately, then stepped past her without a word. As he reached the jet bridge, he could feel her stare boring into his back, but he didn't turn. He didn't need to. The flight attendant at the aircraft door greeted him with a smile that faltered the moment she saw his boarding pass. She hesitated. "Oh, you're in 1C. Jalen nodded. "That's right. Please hold on just a moment," she said, then vanished behind the curtain. Jalen stood there, unmoving. Through the partially drawn curtain, he heard soft voices, the shuffle of papers. Then, a sharper whisper. "Supervisor Jenkins again. I told you, we have a standard to uphold in this section." Someone else responded, their voice muffled. "His ticket is confirmed. You want us to bump a confirmed first-class guest to economy because you don't like how he's dressed?" Supervisor Jenkins's voice dropped, but Jalen heard enough. "I don't care who he is. It's about presentation. Everyone else up there will notice." The curtain opened. Another attendant, this one older, more composed, gave Jalen a subtle nod. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reynolds." Jalen stepped into the cabin and was immediately met with a stark contrast. Seat 1C was a plush leather throne, bathed in the soft glow of the cabin lights, a stark contrast to the harsh fluorescent lights of the terminal. He placed his bag in the overhead compartment with a deliberate motion, then settled into the seat, his spine straight, his gaze steady. The other passengers, a sea of mostly older, mostly white faces, were sipping pre-takeoff champagne or scrolling through tablets with an air of casual detachment. But Jalen's arrival had disrupted their carefully curated bubble. His presence, previously invisible to them, had become the subject of curious glances and hushed whispers, each word carrying a sting. A man in a double-breasted blazer, balding and heavy-set, turned slightly in his seat and gave Jalen a long, deliberate look. Then he leaned toward the woman beside him and muttered, loud enough for Jalen to hear, "I didn't know they allowed unsupervised minors in first class. Isn't that against FAA policy?" Another man chimed in from behind, his voice dripping with condescension. Laughter rippled through the cabin, low and knowing. A woman with pearls offered a strained smile, but her eyes betrayed her true feelings. Supervisor Jenkins re-entered the cabin, her expression a mask of professional blankness, her posture rigid. She walked down the aisle with purposeful grace, greeting the passengers who acknowledged her with warm entitlement. When she passed Jalen, she didn't speak, didn't nod, just stiffened slightly, as if bracing herself for contact with something unclean. Moments later, a middle-aged woman with flawless makeup, oversized sunglasses, and a silk scarf stood up from her seat in B. She approached Supervisor Jenkins, her voice a hushed but pointed whisper. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I think that young man may be confused. He's been alone this whole time. I'm concerned he's not where he's supposed to be." Supervisor Jenkins blinked, feigning innocence. "I see." The woman gestured delicately toward Jalen. "If you like, I can escort him to coach. My husband and I have children. I know how these things go." Supervisor Jenkins hesitated, pretending to weigh the offer, but the glint of agreement in her eyes gave her away. Jalen watched them both, silent and still. The woman turned toward him, a practiced maternal smile plastered on her face. "Sweetheart, are you traveling alone? Do you know where your parents are?" Her voice was soft, syrupy, the same tone someone might use with a lost puppy. Jalen tilted his head, his voice calm, clear, and very much that of someone in control. "I'm good, thank you." The woman blinked. "Oh, it's just, I thought you might have wandered up here." Supervisor Jenkins stepped in. "Ma'am, thank you, we'll take it from here." The woman gave one last sympathetic look to Jalen before returning to her seat, her posture stiff with disappointment. Supervisor Jenkins lingered. "If anything's unclear about your ticket, Mr. Reynolds, now is the time to speak up." "It's very clear," Jalen replied. "Seat 1C, first class, paid in full." Supervisor Jenkins didn't respond. She walked off, but not without casting a glance at the flight attendant near the cockpit, a silent signal exchanged between professionals complicit in maintaining a certain image. Jalen looked out the window. The jet bridge was nearly empty now, boarding almost complete. His phone buzzed again in his jacket. Another message from his ground contact. Flight status confirmed. Passenger manifest public visibility set to restricted. Unusual. Still monitoring. He locked the screen. If his presence made people this uncomfortable, there had to be a deeper reason. It wasn't just race. It wasn't just age. It was something else. Something underneath. Across the aisle, an older woman with a pearl pin and a burgundy leather clutch leaned forward, speaking past the row divider. "Don't let them get to you," she said, her voice like velvet worn thin by years. Jalen turned. "Ma'am, you're not the first to sit in a seat they don't think you've earned, and you won't be the last. Just remember, they don't decide who belongs. They just think they do." Her eyes twinkled, but her tone was grave. "My son went through the same thing. He's a surgeon now, flies private." Jalen nodded once. "Thank you." The woman sat back, satisfied. She wasn't trying to rescue him. She was reminding him, quietly, firmly, that survival came with memory. As the final passengers settled and the doors were sealed, Supervisor Jenkins made one last pass through the cabin. She stopped beside Jalen's seat and reached into the console, pretending to check the safety card. Then she whispered, "Any disturbances and I won't hesitate to report it as non-compliance. FAA policy." Jalen raised his eyes slowly. Same goes for you. Supervisor Jenkins's smile froze. The engines roared to life beneath them. Jalen leaned back, exhaled slowly, and closed his eyes. But not to sleep. He was listening. Jalen sat motionless in seat 1C, his back straight, gaze fixed ahead, but his mind was tracking every breath around him. Supervisor Jenkins had disappeared behind the curtain, but her echo lingered in the air. The passengers who had whispered and speculated earlier now sank into silence, some with shame, others with indifference, and a few, very few, with discomfort that hinted at conscience. Just as the plane paused at the end of the runway, a new figure emerged from the front cabin. A woman with sharp features, platinum blonde hair pulled into a flawless bun, and a clipboard tucked tightly to her chest, like it was part of her spine. Her name tag read Veronica S. Her heels clicked softly against the floor as she stopped beside Jalen's seat. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her tone professional but edged like broken glass under velvet. Jalen didn't look up. "Yes?" Veronica lowered her voice to a theatrical hush, but loud enough for others to hear. "We've re-reviewed the check-in records. There may have been an error during the scanning process. A mismatch in our manifest. Nothing personal, of course." Jalen turned his head slowly, meeting her eyes with a calm that unnerved her more than anger might have. "What kind of mismatch?" Veronica gave a tight smile. "Your digital boarding pass triggered a duplicate flag. It could be a system error, or occasionally a reused QR code. Happens more often than you'd think." "My seat was paid for directly through Black Card," Jalen said evenly. "Confirmed 2 weeks ago. If you'd like, I can forward the receipt to the pilot." A flicker of something crossed Veronica's face, something between surprise and irritation. "No need for that," she said quickly, then added with a small, venom-laced laugh, although I must say, most of our premium guests tend to dress the part. "Just an observation." Jalen blinked once. "Is there a written dress code I violated?" "It's more about expectations," she said, straightening up. "Image representation." "Sounds like you're trying to say I don't look the way a first-class passenger should," Jalen replied. "You could just say that." Veronica's smile vanished. "Let's not make this difficult, sir." Before Jalen could answer, a voice rose from just behind the curtain, sharp, urgent, female. "Excuse me, where's the supervisor?" The cabin turned slightly as a woman pushed forward from economy, her steps quick and purposeful, her eyes locked instantly on Jalen. "Jalen," she said, the relief in her voice unmistakable. Veronica stepped into the aisle to intercept her. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat. This area is restricted." "I'm his mother," the woman said clearly, pulling out her ID, "and I have every right to speak to whoever is in charge here. You separated us without explanation, delayed his boarding, and harassed him over a confirmed reservation." Veronica didn't budge. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and comply with crew instructions. You are not authorized to demand internal oversight while on board. You made him sit in public, interrogated him, tried to shame him over his clothes, his age, his skin," Jalen's mother snapped. "You don't get to do that and then hide behind policy." Passengers were no longer pretending not to listen. Several had put down their glasses. One man removed his headphones. An older woman clutched her purse tighter, discomfort spreading like a cold draft. Veronica's smile returned, but now it was pure ice. "You're not in a position to make demands. Not here." "I'm not making demands," the woman replied. "I'm recording." She held up her phone. "You have 30 seconds to explain, or I forward this to legal." Veronica froze for a moment. Everything held still. The plane, the people, even the air. Then, as if realizing how close she was to something bigger than procedure, she stepped back with a huff and turned sharply on her heel. "I'll speak to the captain," she muttered, vanishing behind the curtain. Jalen exhaled slowly. His mother leaned down and touched his shoulder. "You okay?" "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was hollow. "You shouldn't have had to come up here." She turned, locking eyes with the passengers who had watched silently for the last 20 minutes. No one said a word. No one offered help until now. From across the aisle, the older woman with a pearl pin spoke again, louder this time. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened on this airline, and it won't be the last unless someone says something." She looked around. "Anyone else want to speak up, or are we just here to sip wine and pretend it's not our problem?" A murmur rippled through the cabin. One man cleared his throat. Another looked down at his phone. A third adjusted his collar. Jalen closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "They don't see me," he said quietly. "They only see what they expect me to be." His mother nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time they learn who you really are." Jalen sat still in his seat, his mother beside him now, both facing forward with the unshakable posture of people who had long grown used to being watched, but never truly seen. But this time, someone was seeing. For across the aisle, a man in his 30s, short beard, navy bomber jacket, camera hung loosely around his neck, held his phone at chest level. His name was Kevin Madsen, freelance journalist, traveling to D.C. for a feature on corporate bias in the aviation industry. He hadn't expected his subject to appear before takeoff. He had been recording since the moment Veronica stepped into the cabin and challenged Jalen's presence. And now, with a few quick taps, the footage was live on his feed. "American Majesty Airlines," he whispered into the mic, "is currently detaining a young black passenger and his mother, first-class ticket holders, under what appears to be fabricated technical issues and personal bias. This is real-time witness with me." The caption read, "Shah justice for Jalen, let's make them see." And with that post, the storm began. Comments surged in, people demanding answers. Screenshots of American Majesty's executive board circulating, even celebrities chiming in. Within minutes, "Is this 1965? Do better. They picked the wrong kid today." Meanwhile, inside the plane, none of the crew knew they were being broadcast to thousands. Veronica had retreated to the galley. Supervisor Jenkins paced just behind the curtain. Then, a new voice entered the arena. A tall man in a slim-cut gray suit, badge around his neck, emerged from the cockpit corridor. His presence carried the kind of authority that made people straighten up instinctively. He was the flight operations manager, Mr. Dylan Hartley. He walked directly to row 1C and crouched slightly beside Jalen's seat, his face the model of corporate diplomacy. "Mr. Reynolds," he began, his voice low but clear, "we understand you've experienced some confusion during the boarding process. For that, I apologize." Jalen looked at him, saying nothing. His mother folded her arms. "If you're here to fix the problem," she said, "start by telling your crew to stop lying to passengers." Hartley didn't flinch. At this point, nothing seemed to faze him. He continued, "We feel it would be best to de-escalate the situation. I'm going to ask you and your mother to step off the aircraft so we can sort this out with full attention on the ground. It's simply to avoid further disruption on board." Jalen narrowed his eyes. "You want us off the plane?" "Only temporarily," Hartley insisted. "Once we've clarified the manifest, you can reboard." His words were smooth, too smooth, scripted. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "No," Jalen's mother said. "We've been harassed, isolated, publicly questioned, and now you want to remove us, so there's no record. Not happening." Hartley sighed, as if her resistance inconvenienced him. "Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll be forced to involve airport security." From behind them, a passenger spoke loudly. "You're going to throw them off the flight now? After everything?" Heads turned. Kevin stood up, holding his phone clearly now. "Just so you know," he said, "you're live to 28,000 people and climbing. I'd choose your next sentence very carefully." Hartley froze, calculating. Veronica stepped back into the aisle, now visibly tense. "Sir," she addressed Kevin, "recording inside an aircraft is against policy." "Funny," Kevin replied. "So is discrimination. Let's see which one the court cares about more." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. A woman muttered, "This is outrageous," while her seatmate whispered back, "They're going viral right now." Jalen unlocked his phone, opened Twitter, and saw his name, #JusticeForJalen, trending in 5 cities. He didn't post anything. He didn't need to. The truth was already spreading faster than any lie they could tell. Hartley straightened up, his voice suddenly lower. "I'll need to speak to the captain," he said, retreating quickly. Veronica followed, but not before casting Jalen one last look, a mix of disdain and something new, fear. The aircraft remained grounded, tension thickening as seconds passed like minutes. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man called out, "If they're removed, I'm getting off too." 2 more nodded. "This isn't the airline I thought I paid for." Supervisor Jenkins stood frozen at the front, eyes scanning the cabin, unsure what to do when authority was dissolving in public. Jalen turned to his mom. "We're not moving." Jalen remained seated, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning not with fear, but with clarity. His mother kept a steady hand on his arm, her calm, unshaken. though her fingers trembled slightly with a fury she refused to show. At the front of the cabin, Supervisor Jenkins moved stiffly, avoiding eye contact with every passenger. Veronica, nowhere in sight, had disappeared behind the curtain. Kevin's live stream continued rolling quietly from his seat, with comments pouring in faster than he could read. The pressure mounted until, without warning, the cabin doors clicked open and two uniformed security officers stepped inside. They wore the dark navy of airport enforcement, not TSA, but American Majesty's contracted aviation security team. Both officers were black, and their sudden arrival drew audible gasps and murmurs from passengers who had begun hoping the situation might resolve peacefully. One of the officers, tall and square-jawed, with a no-nonsense gait, scanned the cabin briefly before stepping forward. The other held a small tablet, eyes flicking across the manifest data. "Where's the passenger in question?" the lead officer asked. Supervisor Jenkins, regaining her confidence behind the uniformed presence, pointed directly at Jalen. "Seat 1C. He and his companion are refusing a lawful request to deplane." The officer nodded and approached slowly, stopping just beside Jalen's row. "Sir," he said, his voice even and controlled, "we've been asked to escort you and your guardian off the aircraft to resolve an ongoing dispute. Can we talk outside the cabin?" Before Jalen could speak, his mother interjected. "Is this standard procedure for a customer with a confirmed ticket?" The officer's jaw shifted slightly. "Ma'am, I don't make the policies. I enforce what's given." "Then enforce fairness," she said flatly, "because we're not moving based on lies." The officer's eyes flicked to the boarding pass in Jalen's lap, and something in his posture changed. He leaned in slightly. "Do you mind showing me that again, sir?" Jalen picked it up and handed it to him silently. The officer scanned the QR code with his tablet, his eyes narrowing at the result. The screen flashed Priority Gold Access Verified. He double-checked. Same result. "C'est what so bad." "This says Priority Gold," he murmured, louder now. "That status doesn't come cheap." "It's not cheap," Jalen said. "It's earned." The second officer peered over the tablet, then looked toward Supervisor Jenkins. "Did you not see this?" Supervisor Jenkins stiffened. "I wasn't handling the initial scan, but even so, we had a discrepancy." "There's no discrepancy here," the officer cut in, his voice turning harder. "This is a top-tier verified boarding status." Before anyone could respond, Veronica suddenly re-emerged, heels clicking with purpose. "Officers," she said briskly, "please conduct a standard bag check before anything else. We've had suspicious discrepancies with digital boarding passes before." The officers glanced at each other, but protocol kicked in. "Do you have any checked or carry-on bags with you, sir?" the second officer asked, though his tone had grown less commanding and more conflicted. "Just this," Jalen replied, gesturing to the case above him. "Open it," the officer said, though his tone had grown less commanding and more conflicted. Jalen stood, pulled down the case, and unzipped it slowly. Inside, a neatly folded blazer, a tablet charger, a signed hardcover novel, and a monogrammed wallet. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. But then, Veronica stepped forward. "What about her?" she said, gesturing to Jalen's mother. She boarded separately. "I'd like her bag checked as well." "Excuse me?" his mother said, staring incredulously. "You think I'm smuggling contraband?" Veronica smiled thinly. "It's just protocol. If you're not hiding anything, it shouldn't be a problem." The lead officer's brow furrowed. He turned to the second. "Run her name." The tablet beeped. "She's not even on the manifest," the second officer reported. "Her seat was swapped from economy last minute." "Override." "I bought that seat," the mother said, "and your system let me upgrade at the desk." But it was too late. Suspicion had now taken hold like a weed. The officer motioned. "We'll need to check your belongings, ma'am." With every hand that touched her luggage, the atmosphere in the cabin turned uglier. The passengers watched, some whispering, some fidgeting, some looking away entirely. One woman across the aisle clutched her pearls as if proximity to the search might stain her. But it was Kevin who stood again, this time his voice loud and clear. "You're inspecting a mother and child with verified tickets while ignoring the fact that your system, your crew, lied. You're humiliating them because your pride won't let you back down." He pointed to the boarding pass. "This is economy. This is priority gold. That means they're valued customers, or at least they should be." Veronica turned on him. "This is none of your concern." "Wrong," he said. "This is everyone's concern, and we're not letting you sweep it under the rug." At that, a passenger too rose, her voice trembling yet determined. "I have a daughter his age. If she were treated like this, I'd want the world to know." Then another. This isn't right. As the energy in the cabin shifted and more passengers began to murmur in growing disapproval, Jalen calmly zipped up his bag again and returned it to the overhead compartment. It was a quiet, deliberate motion that spoke of practiced restraint. He sat back down, still under the eyes of the security officers, the lead one now noticeably hesitant, unsure whether to escalate or retreat. His mother sat beside him, her hands still steady, her chin lifted defiantly, her silence louder than any outcry. Supervisor Jenkins, however, wasn't finished. Her tone brittle and falsely pleasant, she stepped forward once again and said, "Before we conclude, I'd like to take a look at the laptop he's been using. Our digital security team has noted issues with passengers using unauthorized devices in flight." Jalen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached down, slid his backpack from under the seat, and carefully removed the sleek, gold-toned MacBook from the padded interior. The moment he opened it, and the screen glowed to life, gasps echoed faintly across the cabin. On the back of the laptop, etched directly into the casing in fine metallic script, was a unique and unmistakable crest, the Reynolds Group insignia, a falcon in flight over a rising sun, encircled by laurels. Underneath it, read in polished silver lettering, Private Edition 106. Supervisor Jenkins froze, her mouth parting slightly. Even the security officer blinked, recognizing a logo. Reynolds Group was no ordinary corporation. It was a multinational investment empire that quietly owned major stakes in over 50 global companies, including American Majesty Airlines itself. The MacBook Jalen now held wasn't just rare, it was exclusive to inner circle members of the Reynolds family. Still, Jalen said nothing. He simply turned the laptop toward the officers and waited. Kevin's live stream had captured every second of the reveal. The chat exploded. Comments like Reynolds Air confirmed and Lisa about to lose her pension filled the feed as Supervisor Jenkins stammered, trying to recover her footing. The cabin went silent. Even the hum of the aircraft seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was now on Jalen, on his laptop, on the crest that shone with quiet authority. The security officers exchanged glances, the weight of the situation shifting dramatically. Veronica, however, attempted one last act of defiance. "That's just a sticker," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Anyone can buy a sticker." Jalen finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "It's not a sticker, it's laser etched. This laptop is a limited edition. It's part of a series given only to the Reynolds family." He turned the laptop slightly, and a small, almost invisible hologram flickered beneath the crest. "This is the serial number." The lead security officer stepped closer, his professional demeanor now replaced with a hint of awe. He knew the crest, and he knew what it meant. I see," he stammered. The second officer's tablet beeped again. "Sir," he said, his voice hesitant, "I'm getting a direct override from corporate security. They're confirming Mr. Reynolds' identification. And the laptop." Supervisor Jenkins's face drained of color. Veronica's composure cracked completely. The silence stretched, heavy and thick, until the lead security officer finally spoke. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Jalen's mother, "I apologize for the inconvenience. You and your son are free to remain on board. There will be no further searches and no further harassment." He turned to his partner. "Let's go." The two officers retreated quickly, their steps purposeful, their faces tight with a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Jalen closed his laptop, his movements deliberate. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply met his mother's gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the injustice they had endured. The cabin remained hushed, the atmosphere thick with the weight of unspoken apologies and the sting of exposed prejudice. The passengers who had earlier watched with indifference or amusement now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces flushed with shame. Kevin, the journalist, continued his live stream, narrating the unfolding events with a mix of shock and grim satisfaction. The comments section exploded. "This is insane. They tried to kick off the owner's family? Someone's losing their job tonight." Veronica and Supervisor Jenkins stood frozen at the front of the cabin, their authority shattered, their faces pale. The flight attendants moved with careful efficiency, their smiles strained, their eyes darting nervously. Then a new voice cut through the tension. It was the captain, his voice calm and authoritative, coming over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been made aware of a situation that occurred during boarding. I want to assure you that American Majesty Airlines does not condone any form of discrimination or mistreatment of passengers." He paused, and his voice took on a new tone, firm and unwavering. "The crew members involved in the incident have been relieved of their duties and will be subject to immediate disciplinary action. We are committed to ensuring the safety and respect of all our passengers, regardless of their background or appearance." The captain's announcement was met with a mix of relief and disbelief. Some passengers applauded, their faces etched with a newfound sense of justice. Others remained silent, their eyes fixed on Jalen, their expressions a mix of curiosity and shame. Jalen, however, remained unmoved. He opened his laptop again, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his face focused and determined. He wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't reveling in the moment. He was working. His mother leaned closer. "What are you doing?" Jalen didn't look up. "I'm sending a message." Moments later, a notification popped up on the cabin screens. It was a tweet from the official Reynolds Group account. It showed a photo of Jalen and his mother on the plane, with the caption, "My family was racially profiled and harassed on American Majesty Airlines. This is unacceptable. We demand accountability." The tweet went viral within seconds. News outlets picked up the story. Justice for Jalen trended worldwide. American Majesty's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments and calls for a boycott. The pressure mounted. American Majesty's stock price plummeted. The airline's CEO issued a public apology, promising a full investigation and sweeping changes to their policies and training procedures. But Jalen wasn't finished. He used his platform to amplify the voices of others who had experienced similar discrimination. He shared their stories, he demanded systemic change, and he called for a boycott of American Majesty until they demonstrated a genuine commitment to justice and equality. The impact was immediate and profound. American Majesty Airlines was forced to confront its deep-seated biases. They implemented mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees. They revised their policies to address racial profiling and discrimination, and they established a community advisory board to ensure accountability and transparency. Veronica and Supervisor Jenkins were fired. Other employees who had engaged in discriminatory behavior were also held accountable. But the most significant change came from within. The incident forced American Majesty Airlines to confront its own identity, to acknowledge its role in perpetuating systemic injustice, and to commit to becoming a truly inclusive and equitable company. As the plane finally took off, Jalen looked out the window, his face thoughtful. He had faced down prejudice, he had wielded his power with purpose, and he had sparked a movement for change. But he knew that the fight was far from over. The aftermath of the American Majesty incident sent shockwaves through the aviation industry and beyond. It became a watershed moment, a stark reminder of the insidious nature of systemic racism and the urgent need for comprehensive change. Jalen, initially thrust into the spotlight, used his platform with wisdom and purpose. He didn't seek personal gain or vengeance. Instead, he became a powerful advocate for justice and equality, demanding not just apologies, but concrete action. He testified before congressional committees, sharing his experience and calling for stricter regulations to prevent discrimination in air travel. He partnered with civil rights organizations to develop training programs for airline employees, emphasizing empathy, cultural sensitivity, and the importance of challenging implicit bias. He even worked with American Majesty Airlines, not to punish them, but to help them transform. He understood that true change required collaboration, not just condemnation. He pushed them to go beyond surface-level reforms, to dismantle the very structures that allowed discrimination to flourish. American Majesty, under intense scrutiny and public pressure, embarked on a journey of profound self-examination. They didn't just revise their policies, they rewrote their corporate culture. They established diversity and inclusion councils at every level of the company, ensuring that marginalized voices were heard and valued. They invested heavily in training programs designed to challenge employees' assumptions and biases, to foster a culture of respect and understanding. They created mentorship programs to support aspiring aviation professionals from underrepresented communities. They even changed their hiring practices, actively recruiting employees from diverse backgrounds, ensuring that their workforce reflected the diversity of the world they served. But the most significant change was the shift in mindset. American Majesty, once defined by its rigid adherence to tradition and its blind spot to systemic injustice, began to embrace a new identity, one rooted in empathy, equity, and a genuine commitment to inclusivity. The impact of Jalen's actions extended far beyond American Majesty Airlines. Other airlines, seeing the public outcry and the potential consequences of inaction, began to reevaluate their own policies and practices. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the content, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more updates. Don't forget to share it with your friends too. Let's spread the word together. Thanks for the support.